too. Here, I'll put something in the chat.
We can hear you. We're just working through something here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right, everybody, should we get started? We ready?
It's because I'm going to want to walk over to that table.
Michael, are we ready to go?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the September 2023 meeting of the St. Mary's County Library Board of Trustees. My name is Michael Dunn. I'm the president. I believe we have a quorum of trustees here, which is great. So let's go around and introduce ourselves. Sharon, can we start with you? And then we'll jump into the meeting room.
I'm Sharon Fitzsimmons, board trustee.
John Walters.
Trustee Setlack, treasurer.
John Johnston, vice president.
Judith Gwynn, trustee.
All right, it's great to see everybody. We do have a quorum, so we can get started. The first item of business is the approval of the August 2023 minutes. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I will move to approve the August 2023 minutes as presented.
Second.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Judith. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, I guess we're ready for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes as written, please say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? All right, the motion carries. Moving on to the approval of the monthly expense ledger for August. We can entertain a motion to approve this and then have some discussion afterward.
I actually wanted to ask about the security plugins on
Yeah,
the
that's my
last
question
page.
too.
They are IT supplies for our firewall. Robert's been working on our firewalls across all three branches.
I unmuted it. I don't hear anything.
Oh, you're muted.
No,
Hi,
I
Dorothy,
unmuted
welcome.
it. Oh, wait a minute.
There we go. Dorothy, we are
For
just
the
looking
record,
at
Dorothy
the
Waters
EAL.
is joining us.
Ask about page 3 out of 4, the third one down. It's not a big number. Fee cards, 182.75. What are they?
For Barefoot Graphics.
They are the cards that we give out to all new card holders, or they're an information sheet that we give out to all new card holders that say what our fees are, or lost and stolen or lost and damaged items, as well as checkouts and all of, it's just our informational card that we give to all new card holders.
Little wallet size thing?
And it's about a quarter of a sheet.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, we can entertain a motion to approve the EALs.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstained? Okay, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report, but we are not due to hear from Tressa on that quarterly basis until October, so we can keep moving on. And I will send it over to John for the Smurla report.
Okay, thank you. See, we did a minor change to health retirement accounts. Replaced a Schwab account with three cash equivalent funds. I have the names here, and I can provide that if you're interested. And we also agreed to begin working with Hub City to outsource the delivery system among the regional libraries. Sort of begin negotiating with them. That was based on a recommendation. And the goal is to resolve any issues, if there are employee absences interfering with delivery, which I think has happened a few times recently.
Quite a bit, actually.
What's that?
Quite a bit, actually. We had a cancellation this week. And we're really looking forward to having a new vendor doing that. It's just really great for customer service because our customers grew so used to having the materials they request coming from the library being there within, say, 2 days. And the whole really last year, often the materials would be delayed as much as a week just because of trucks breaking down or employee issues. And this is not Smirla, this was another vendor. So we're really looking forward to having the new vendor. We've heard great recommendations for them.
So currently the drivers are contractors.
Yeah, they would be, yeah, they will be, it'll be contracted service and they will,
So you're,
and if one isn't available, they can turn to another one of their employees.
so
so
the
there's-
current drivers are contractors, you're just switching firms?
Um,
And I was wondering if the trucks are contracted also, or do they
Yeah.
belong to us? Just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that like it's currently got like a single employee. I can confirm that though.
Okay, thank you, John. Anything else to add?
No,
All right, well, thank you very much. We can move on in the agenda to the celebrations, and I'll turn it over to Michael.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. We're going to start with two very special ones. And the first is after 34 years, Karen Elvey is retiring. Okay. I'm facing somebody else.
There is your-
Sorry. Yeah, they're okay. Get you on camera here. So Karen, 34 years, you've just given outstanding service. You've been a linchpin here at Lexington Park. I know the customers are going to miss you as much as the staff are going to miss you. Thank you so much for all your great service, and this is something for you. Do you want to say anything?
It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. Can't think of a better place to work than to work with. And what we do.
Thank you so very much. I'm sorry. Let's just go ahead and do that.
The next chapter.
Well, thank you again for all your great service to the library, and you'll be very much missed. Yeah, thank you. And the next one is also a Lexington Park employee. Amy, could you please come on up? So 20 years service this month at the library. So today, in fact, so officially 20 years. So we have a 20-year pin for you, and we have a 20-year certificate. And I cannot imagine Lexington Park Library without you. You're such a, not only a great leader here, but so intensely involved with the community and making sure that Lexington Park is going to become one of the great places to live in the county. So anything you want to say?
Just I love working here. I love what we do here in the community with the library, and I'm just blessed to work with the most amazing staff of any library that I've ever known. The people who work here are extraordinary, and they work every day alongside our community and make it a good place to live. So I'm really grateful to them.
Thank you so much for 20 years.
Just to echo Michael, Karen and Amy, thank you both so much for the incredible work you've done and the difference you've made for our community as a whole and for so many individuals who come to the library. You all are part of the fabric of our community and our organization, and you've made such a difference. And, you know I speak for the whole board when I say how grateful we all are to you both.
Thank you, Michael. We do have some hip hip hoorays. And they are all for the same thing. It seems when it rains, it pours. For years and years, we have not had any trouble with pests coming back, but we're always alert to that. And recently, both at Leonardtown and at Lexington Park, we had some materials come back that did have pests in them. But staff were alert to that. They very quickly spotted them and made sure that they were contained to book drop areas. And so we want to thank the staff for being very sharp-eyed and just making sure of the community safety and the safety of our materials. So thank you to Brian Youngs, Sierra Brown, Catherine Daly, Becca Barker, and Mary Beth Kosiniak, all of whom were either involved with spotting that, isolating materials, or reaching out to administration to make sure that we could communicate about this. And when that happens, we do, fumigate the branch. We just make sure that everything is safe. And so thank you to all of those for just being very careful about materials returns. Have a slight change to the agenda in that at least one board member may have to leave a little early. Karen, thank you so much. So I want to move right into the investment policy documents and then ask you to take possible action on asset strategy recommendations. So the investment policy documents, I want to start with one that's been added to the packet today. It is entitled at the top, and it might be the last page of your packet, Schwab Contributions and Health Refund. And yeah, okay, oh, great, thank you. So John, you had asked about this, and Belinda has been working with our accountant to try to get a complete picture of our contributions to this OPEB account over the years since its inception of December 1st, 2012. So you'll see that in fiscal year 13, a total of $492,000 were contributed to it. And that was when the library was still a part of the county. So that was county investments into the library's OPEB fund as part of our share of the employees that we had who were eligible for it at the time. And the contributions in fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15, which are also, you see, substantially larger, 73,000, 68,833, $52,389 were also while we were part of the county. So the county was investing in the library's OPEB fund at that time. In fiscal year 2015, we did separate from the county. And so you'll see our contributions to Schwab after that. Switching over to the health refund payment. So every once in a while, we are in the county's healthcare system. And so sometimes as we pay in, the amount that we were expected to pay in, we may pay a little bit more, so we get some money back. In other cases, the estimate that we'd be paying on a monthly basis would be too low. So we end up having to owe the county some money at the end of the fiscal year. So in 16 and 17, you see, we actually had to pay out to the county somewhat. And in other years, we've gotten some health refund payments. But back to the fiscal year 18 and 19, put some money in and put some money in again in 21 and 22. In fiscal year 23, we put a little over $3,000 in. That's when we looked at the sort of past of this, found that we had this very small fund sitting there that we really did not know the purpose of. And it was, however, dedicated to the OPEB. So that all went in. So these are the total contributions that the library, either through the county or directly from the library, have put into the OPEB fund. And that's just kind of a kickoff for sort of what our investment policy statements are. So you have, yes,
question.
please.
So I'm not clear, the column health refund payment versus contributions to Schwab, it's not the same thing. We're getting a refund in and then we're transferring to Schwab. This is. two
Well,
different activities here.
the contributions to Schwab, the board decides those. And this will become a bit clearer. Right now, we're still working with the accountant and with the auditor on, there's an escrow fund that all these health refund payments have gone into. And we frankly, don't think we need that escrow fund. We've paid out all these amounts that we owe for the, for the retirees' benefits on a pay-go basis. We've paid them out, but they were not paid from that escrow, which they should originally have been. So basically, although we've got money sitting in an escrow fund, and we'll give you more details on this to follow, but that's basically why we were tracking the health refund payments.
So is Schwab holding the escrow account?
No, they are not.
No, so the health refund is literally from the county back to us
Right.
directly,
Right.
or a payment or request from us to pay them to the
Right.
county. The Schwab contributions are what you as the board tell us to put into Schwab, and we pay that from whatever funds we have. They aren't
Okay.
necessarily connected.
They're
There's
not
just
connected.
a
This
health
is- yeah.
refund or a health payment. We get those every year possibly.
Right.
And then there's the contributions to Schwab. They aren't the same thing, and they don't have to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Schwab, by Schwab, you mean the OPEB.
That's the
Yes.
OPEB
OPEB,
fund,
okay.
yeah. So we were asked to give you these figures and here they are.
And so when the money comes in, then where is it going? Just into,
Which it goes into our general fund
General fund,
balance
okay.
and it sits there.
Well-
So it's money that we sort of have, but at the sort of up till now, it was reserved in a separate sort of part of our funding in an escrow. And we simply don't think we need the escrow. So we're working with the accountant on that. I can tell you though, that you're not going to have a $200,000 windfall. That money has been spent out. So it's just sitting there in an escrow and we don't think we need that escrow. So we're.
no, I understand this is the accumulation of over since 2013.
Exactly.
Yes, so the money, when it comes in, it does go into our account, but it actually has to go towards health. So we can use it to pay directly from the health bill, which will then take money out of our operating funds, or you can use it to put into OPEB, Schwab. Either way, it comes out the same on our profit and loss statement.
So are you looking for the monthly budget report? Are you adjusting in that budget when the money comes in as under income, or does it?
So we don't make that adjustment. We wouldn't make it till the end. So if we put it into the health payment, if we put it into the health retirement payment when we got it, which by the way, we don't get it until the end of a year, like December usually, sometimes January. Then it would just mean that whatever amount they give us is that much that we have extra in our operating budget that we could spend somewhere else.
Right, but
within-
aren't you changing the operating budget that time by adding money in? And where-
Possibly,
I'm
but
saying, where does that, get a decision made every year where we should put it, or does it come to the board? Are you changing your budget because you've got?
so up until this year, we were trying to figure this out. It wasn't done the same way.
Okay,
Because of the changeover between the county and us, there was some differences in how it was maintained and how it was. So that's what the accountant and I were working on, is trying to determine where all of this was, how it was worked through within the budget, and why it was or wasn't put in certain places. So this fiscal year, we'll start a new process on how we do that.
And you will have a full details on that, but we're still working out those details. But to answer your question, yeah, the money comes in, and I don't say we do a budget adjustment just so much as it's sort of income. And then at the end of the year, you can see, okay, here's what came in, and that amount is always noted for you.
Do you estimate it, but it varies, or do you just,
I have no idea what it
so
will
you
be.
put 0 in and then if we get something, we get something?
Right, because
and-
we don't, it all depends on how much the health insurance is used by our employees. So we literally, and since we don't have that information, we will have absolutely no idea whether or not we will have to pay or if we'll get something back. And like Michael said, it is income when it comes in, and it's treated just the same way as our fines and our services. If they go over our income, then that's extra income we have that we can work through at the end of how to use it.
Okay.
So I have two questions, if I may. So on the same page we're looking at here, look at FY 23. I want to be sure I understand the numbers. The refund was 45,117. Okay. And the transfer to Schwab was $3,000. So
They aren't connected.
Yeah,
They're
so
not
the
connected.
transfer from Schwab was because we closed out that small account that was in PNC. It was $3,000 sitting in a separate account. We said, we don't know what this is for, but it was originally connected somehow to the OPEB account. So you approved simply moving that $3,000 that was in that small account into the healthcare, into the OPEB.
So, and I did learn through my research that those original FY 13 payments came from that original MLGIP OPEB account that we had. So it appears that when they first were told to set up an OPEB, it was set up through that MLGIP. There was just an OPEB account. And then when they decided to start using Schwab, I guess, I'm just trying to, determine it as I'm reading through papers. All of the money from that OPEB MLGIP account was transferred into Schwab over that year, except for $3,000. So that was the final amount from that original OPEB MLGIP account that we finally moved into Schwab.
And it probably should have been moved way back in fiscal year 13, but it just wasn't done. So now it's there.
well, if I back up to FY 22, our refund was 31,100 and we put in 30,000 of that.
No, these are not connected. That was the healthcare refund payment. And then the board votes how much they want to put into the OPEB each year. And so for fiscal year 23, for example, as we explained a couple of months back, when you take out the money that is restricted, which is to say the foundation, the Friends money and the donations money, we actually had a negative balance of $5,000. So what we ask the board to do, and typically that's going to be after we get the audit, although frankly, we are really kind of looking more at our accounting profit and loss statement as more exact, because the audit will include depreciation and things like that, as to how much money is left over. And if you have a surplus, then often the board will say, all right, we want to hang on to the surplus, or we'll put some of the surplus into the OPEB. This upcoming year, we're expecting not to have a surplus at the end of when all this process is done. You could still opt to put money into the OPEB, however. These things are not connected.
Okay, so a different question then.
I'm sorry, can we let Sharon jump in here?
So I don't want to beat the dead horse, but I just want to clarify. These things are on the same spreadsheet in order to help us understand that the health refund payment that comes back from the county because employees don't use it is not connected to how much goes into Schwab, but it is allocated and must be used for health payments.
That is
And-
correct.
Okay, so a contribution to Schwab is one of the things that we could do with that leftover refund.
That is correct.
And otherwise, it has been going into an escrow account and that account has been accumulating. And is
Yeah.
that,
That was, that's just an accounting,
okay,
issue. It was being, it's more of hard to explain because the accountant and I were having to backtrack through several years to figure out what was happening. But sometimes sometimes it was being put into the escrow, but then when we were taking money and putting it into Schwab, we weren't decreasing the escrow account. So we are working with the auditors right now to make this correct. So there may be a change in our profit and loss statement when the audit is actually completed, because Erica, my accountant, and I have been working with them on some adjustments. So if that happens, then there might be something that we can move to Schwab for this year and we won't be in that negative. But really what will happen, what will happen each year when you receive that health fund back in the future is we will put it towards the retirement line of the health insurance. So if we get $20,000 back, we will put it towards $20,000 of the retirement insurance. So this year it's a $90,000 bill or assumption of a bill for retirement. So then we would have 70,000 and we'd have an extra 20,000 sitting hopefully at the end of the year. And then when we do our profit and loss statement, that's the best time for the board to then make the decision as to what to transfer over to Schwab, because they are not connected. It should be what we have at the end of the year, profit and loss.
And I'm sorry about any confusion, but we were asked to provide these numbers to the board, and that's kind of why we're giving them to you and why Belinda has gone back to the inception of this account and worked with the accountants to try to give you as exact a figures as we can. But no, they're not directly connected. So we don't have to say, all right, here's $45,000 we got back. That $45,000 has to go to the OPEB. It's really the profit and loss statement that will determine what you want to put into that.
So
So
before we move on, Belinda, do you know when you can expect this review process to be finished? When you might come back to us to let us know sort of the result of this process with you and the auditors?
Yes, so we are almost, cross your fingers, done with the audit. And we, the accountant and I have just last week, or maybe it was the beginning of this week, worked out what we think is the right thing to do for that escrow account. They are working through the adjustments that need to be sent through our accounting system and through the audit, because they will make an adjustment, a prior year adjustment to make those corrections to decrease that escrow account that should have been decreased the previous years.
Okay.
And so basically, as soon as they finish that audit, which they're supposed to be done by the end of this month, I believe. And I think they're on track this year. So
They should be finished by the end of this month because ideally the audit will be approved by you in the October meeting because we owe it to the state on November 1st. Now, if you remember over the last couple of years, it has been delayed and it's not like the state gets mad at us or anything, but that's ideally the case. And the county has asked for their audit as well by the end of this month.
Okay,
And-
so
and
we'll
Michael-
revisit this in October then.
yeah, and
Yes.
Michael, I do want to state that when working through this, the accountant and I both, the accountant found in her notes, because they've been working with this auditor, that the auditors were supposed to be tracking this escrow account as part of the audit, and they hadn't been the last couple of years. So it had just slipped through the cracks, and with the transfer over between Phyllis and I didn't know it was there.
I would say it was less the transfer between Phyllis and you and changing the auditors,
Yeah,
which we did.
That too.
So
I was gonna say, did you change audit firms?
There was
Yeah,
a change in
we did.
audit
Because
firms
that will
just before I
often bring
started.
up a new perspective.
Yeah,
It's good to change audit firms.
Yeah.
I don't know how often you do it.
Yeah,
Typically every
so-
3 years, because you'll get new eyes on it and it's a good thing.
right. And so we really are trying to do what's right, accountant wise, and also for our funds to make sure they're accurate and up to date, and so that it's an easier process in the future for you to decide what that next contribution will be.
And Judith,
Thank you,
just so you know, and I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no.
Just so you know, we tend to go with the auditors selected by the county. They do an RFP and they include the library, and we often get more favorable terms because of a larger contract.
and who are they using now?
I'm sorry.
Are they using the same?
Yes, everybody's using the same auditor now.
And kind of quick, not to be, quick question, we get a draft of the audit or final signed by a partner?
We get a draft of the audit and Belinda and I review it. and we have had occasion to ask for changes. I mean, so, frankly, if I can see that something's not quite right, then we know that we need pretty careful eyes on it, but we present you with a draft of it for your approval, and it's not final until you have approved it. And that process should be taking place next month.
Can we get a step through of what's the process when a retiree goes to see the doctor?
Well, sure.
Don, I think that's a level of detail I'm not sure we want to get in the weeds in right now. Is there a reason or something you're trying to get at with that question?
Yeah, I can answer very, very quickly, actually, Michael. So we are providing health insurance for somebody, and in the case of somebody who's been here for 30 years, they're paying 15% of the cost, and the library is paying 85% of the cost. When they go to the doctor, they present their health insurance, and they may have a copay, but the health insurance is covering most of their expenses.
So what I was getting at, and we can defer that for later, is why don't we just pay it out of the OPEB account and put our line item into OPEB at Schwab?
Well, the idea is that the OPEB account has to be funded at a certain point, and then it becomes self-sustaining, and it pays all those costs from dividends or growth in. So the idea is that fully funded, that's what's going to happen. But right now it's not fully funded, so we're trying to grow it rather than take anything out of it.
Well, given our track record of not putting in, I think we got a steep climb on that.
Yes, but we are still, from the library's regular funds, paying for that healthcare insurance on a pay-go basis. So the employees are being taken care of. We would just like the fund to grow as much as we can. I admit it's an extremely steep climb.
We'll hold that for later.
Okay, so preliminary then, because I was asked for those figures. We have 5 documents, but only there's actually 2 of them are a Word and a PDF version of others. So the first one to look at, please, has the word original written above investment policy statement, and it's dated October of 2012. And this is what Asset Strategy worked with since basically from the inception of the account until the next document to please look at says at the top, investment policy for St. Mary's County Library, and libraries in quotation marks and parentheses. And that is dated September 12, 2021. So this document was approved by the board and voted on and sent to Asset Strategy.
I'm a little confused looking at the original where it says October 2012, and you go to the last page and it was not actually agreed to by the board until December 18. That's when they all signed it.
That's probably just the date of when the policy was formulated, but it was then in 2012 approved by the board in December 2012. And you see the signatures of the then board members. So they think the things to look at most carefully on that one are on page 2, the asset allocation with equities and fixed income. And you see it includes tips, a cash target, high yield income, real estate, so on and so forth. I think that's probably the most important thing to look at in that document.
I'm sorry, which one are you on now?
This is called Investment Policy for St. Mary's County Library at the top. It's a short document.
It's this one.
Oh,
And the reason to look at that is that identifies the board's approval of how the money in the OPEB will be allocated. So the next one to look at says Retirement Benefit Trust of St. Mary's County, October 2012, revised February 2021 on it. Looks like this one. Okay, so this is the form that Asset Strategy likes to use. So what they've done here is they've taken the recommendations for the asset allocation and they have plugged them into page 7. And they are exactly as that last document that the board approved say, with one exception, and that's cash equivalent. So the board had asked for a 0 lower limit and 5% upper limit, and they put in a 10% upper limit on that. But you notice right below that, they do say that asset classes may temporarily vary as much as plus or minus 5%. In any case, this is the asset allocation that Asset Strategy has been working with since then. I think the other thing worthy of note on this is on page 13. And this is how they have invested the money. So you see large cap equities in S&P 500, mid cap equities, S&P 400, real estate was Callan, cash is 90-day T-bills. So that's how they've done that. Okay, the next two documents are actually the same. It's just that one is a PDF and one is Word format. These came straight from Asset Strategy. And a couple of things to note, I think. One is on page 3 under the asset allocation constraints. And you'll see that they have changed those, and these, you have not adopted these recommendations yet. I want to be clear about that. But these are their recommendations, and you'll note that we got them last March for how they think the assets should be allocated. And the other thing to look at is on page 5 and page 6. And you'll note that they are looking at a Russell 1000 for some things rather than an S&P. So these are their recommendations moving forward for how the assets should be allocated. And we've kind of, gone back and forth on these. So my recommendation for moving forward to you, and obviously that is subject to your discussion, is these are the experts we have. We've hired them. These are what they're recommending for the allocations. And I think it's time for a yes or no vote moving forward on these rather than continual discussion.
I would really need time to read and discern this. I haven't had time to do that. Although I noticed on the page with the new allocations, it concerns me. They're recommending moving from a 5% variable to a 10% variable. That's a huge swing. That's a 20-point swing on any one class of funds. And I would need to know, why would they recommend that? I think a 5-point swing is a 10-point swing, basically. So that would be my question is, why would we? That really skews the whole portfolio if you've got a 20-point swing on any fund. I just want to know, why would they recommend that?
Oh, okay. And we, basically, you are in charge of this. So if you don't want it to be 10%, you could approve that at 5%. And we would resubmit this to them and say, that's what we want.
Mhm.
So this is, you don't have to accept this exactly as is, but I'm hoping we can at least get some of the main things approved. And you would still be able to, in the future, look at our investment policy and continue to refine it. But these recommendations have been waiting since March, and I think it's just time that we have have some vote on them.
So I think that I feel comfortable with that 10% variability, depending on market conditions. To me, that gives the managers a tool to apply their expertise as they see fit in a way that we as trustees would not be as involved in some of these like very short-term considerations. I'm going to put forward a motion that we accept this investment policy statement as written, marked in September 2023, in the hopes that we can move forward to a vote. So I'm going to put that motion out there. If anybody would like to second it, or if anybody wants to discuss further or amend it, we can see where we stand at this moment.
I want to second that.
Okay. Additional discussion.
Well, if you take a look on page 3, right in the middle where they have those asset classes, add up the center column, the first 3 lines, and you get 64%. All right. So if our goal is to have that as a target, 64 going up to 74, that does not float my boat. That means in effect that you've got only 25% in fixed income, and fixed income is what kind of cushions the volatility of the stock side. So I'm not big on a 10% swing.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other thoughts or comments or questions?
There were some other places where I thought they were not quite as stringent as I would have liked them to be in terms of selecting managers. Let's see if I can find that. I thought they were looking for managers with something like 3 years experience with the fund or something like that. Where did I see that?
Page 4,
On 4.
number 7,
Thank you.
or 6 and 7.
So 3 years is by no means a full market cycle. I would like to see that redefined, and a market cycle is a little hard to pin down because they vary. But if we're up to me, I would make it at least 7, preferably 10, and I would make it the average of the managers of the fund. I don't think we have any funds, and we don't want any funds that have a single manager. But if you have a 6 or 7 manager platform on a big fund, let's look at an average. Some guys will have been around with that fund a long time. Some have recently joined, but 3, no good.
Well, that 3-year number has been in place since 2012. That the board approved that way back then. So
That doesn't mean we have to stay with it.
I know, John. Please let me finish my thought before you respond. Okay. So is that a call to action? John, are you offering an amendment?
We're talking concerns right now.
Yeah, and we have a motion on the table. So I'm trying to sort of see what we're doing with that.
What, John, what would you recommend?
I would recommend a minimum of 7 average across all the managers of any fund.
I'm
I'm
concerned
noticing
about
they
that.
removed,
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
sorry.
No,
I
go ahead.
noticed they removed the real estate equities, and I don't remember that being in the discussion before. Was there a reasoning for that?
No, they just did that. They also dropped out the high yield component
Right.
They've dropped out tips as well.
and tips.
That is their recommendation.
Yeah.
So I think what I remember based on previous months and what they had brought up, the increase of the upper limit for international equities makes sense because the international equities were doing better than some of the domestic pieces. But I don't understand why they would drop out those other pieces.
I don't remember them ever giving a reason for it. I do remember the high yield piece, which they said they would prefer that we use what's called a core plus bond fund. Now, when you see that plus attached to the word core, it means that going on down inside that fund is something to goose the returns a little bit. In other words, they've got some high yield component hiding down in the bond fund. My problem with that is you have no idea whether or not the managers are raising or lowering that component. I would rather see us break that out and put our own parameters on it. In other words, leave it in the strategy.
I have a concern about a 7-year period, John, and please let me explain why. And you are the expert here. The funds must have been following the same investment strategy for at least 3 years. In the last 3 years, we've seen 2 major downturns. Would we really want someone following a 7-year strategy when we see a downturn in the economy? Wouldn't we prefer that they look at that and say, okay, we're going to adjust? I think 3 years is adequate.
No, because then you're getting into what they call style drift. So let's say you hire a manager and a fund to do X thing, all right? If they start moving around into other categories, and it's not really apparent on the surface, that's called style drift, and you don't want it. The thing you have to remember is the sun does not shine on every investment all the time.
Oh, I understand that. I still think that 3 years, since it's been in place since 2012, is an adequate number there.
I will not vote for 3.
Well,
So John,
Michael,
are you offering an amendment then? Please give us something actionable to work with.
All right, I'm amending the item number 6 on page 4, 3 years to 7. I think that would probably cover most market cycles.
Would anyone want to second that amendment?
So I would just note that if you're changing number 6, you're talking about the team being in place and not the investment strategy that Michael just brought up. That's investment strategy is number 7. So if we're following the same investment strategy for 7 years, you need to amend 7 and not 6.
And I concur. Thank you for that. And I will amend number 7 for same investment strategy for 7 years.
but not 6.
So then, is the amendment to modify part 6 and part 7 or just part 7?
Both.
Both? Okay.
Both.
Would anyone like to second that amendment?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I have,
I will say, I am gonna not support this amendment. I don't think it's necessary to adjust in this manner. That's just my opinion.
I feel like 3 years of experience is not very much. I would support upping that to 5, but I would not recommend following the same investment strategy for 7 years.
so you got to understand, moving their portfolio around is one thing. They're always buying and selling something, but that does not change the strategy. What you don't want is something that you have bought as a large cap growth fund, for example, to turn itself into a large cap value fund. That wasn't why you bought it in the first place.
Yeah, I
Those
think-
things are not as transparent as the general universe of investors think.
Right, strategy doesn't mean you're buying and holding the same companies and stocks. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means your very large overarching picture of what is this investment fund, striving to do. So it's a much bigger picture.
All right, so let's vote on the amendment as written to modify part 6 and 7 of this to move from a 3-year to a 7-year standard. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hands to get a count.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed or abstained? Aye. All right, the motion does not pass. At that point, I think, are we ready to vote on the original motion to approve this IPS as written?
I would like everybody to take a look, same page, item number 1. Must be a bank, insurance company, RIA, which is a mutual fund, or investment advisor. This is a document that may or may not transcend our relationship with Asset Strategies. But I think that the way it is written, it would preclude us using a brokerage firm as opposed to a fee-based advisor.
I guess I just say to that if we are not going to go with asset strategy in the future, which is a possibility, that you would have a new investment strategy at that time, and you could include that in your new policy.
It's just a matter of who we would be using. We may love everything else in this document. Do you want to redo the whole document just because we went to a brokerage firm?
If you did, you could simply amend that to do so.
And that language has been consistent in the IPS since 2012, just as a note.
Could you add the additional language for the brokerage firm? And it's there then if you wanted to change later?
You could without having to create a whole new document. In other words, if you loved everything about this document, it basically says, no, you can't use a brokerage firm.
But then we could just amend the document if we wanted to use a brokerage firm, couldn't we?
Why not fix it now?
Why not fix it now? Why don't we just put in or brokerage firm?
I agree.
Because you don't necessarily want asset strategy they're not going to use a brokerage firm. Why add it?
Well, I don't
Why
think
not?
they've really been on the ball in how they've serviced us to date. If you look at the individual recommendations that we've had on the table for a couple of months, they couldn't even get the labels on them correct. And in each one, their recommendation of the 3 was,
All
I
right.
thought, the weak sister.
John, I don't want to revisit the last 6 months. I kind of want to stay focused here. I think, are you proposing an amendment to add the option of a brokerage firm in section 1?
I am.
Okay. Would anybody like to second that motion?
I will second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of adding the language of a brokerage firm to the entity in 1, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right. Any opposed or abstained? Okay, motion carries. All right.
I'm sorry, but we need to know exactly what language you will use and where you will insert it, please.
All right, so how about be a bank, insurance company, registered investment company, parentheses, mutual fund, and then at that point, add brokerage firm or investment advisor.
That is correct. That's the spot for it. After the parent and before the or.
Thank you.
Okay. So the motion at hand is to approve this IPS with the amendment of that language about a brokerage firm under section 1 of selection of money managers. All in favor of approving this motion, please say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
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 Any opposed or abstained? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will let asset strategy know of the change that has been made. And then you'll notice that this is to be signed by Michael, so we'll give an amended copy to Michael to sign, and that will get transferred to asset strategy. At that point, it is 10:25. You've been an hour. Do you wish to have a break, or shall we just plow on?
Why don't we take a 5-minute break? A hard 5, and we will come back at 10:30. Can I get a motion to have a 5-minute break?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, see you in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ready to recommence, Michael? All right, thank you.
Yes, let's reconvene.
Um, our next item will then be the fiscal year 24 budget review, and you have that in your packet. And with 17% of the year gone by, most things are well within tolerance. Substitute salary a little above that. Substitutes are when we need to bring somebody in either due to somebody in the branch being ill or on vacation, and we need to have, for example, at least 3 people every night, just to help maintain safety. So we'll bring a substitute in, and that budget often gets unfortunately exhausted by April, so we're not particularly concerned about that one. But most of those lines are running right about where they should. In the insurance, we are doing a little bit of pay-go on OPEB, but it's not certainly of concern yet.
Would you keep us up to date on page and category you're on?
I'm sorry, that's page 1. Moving on to page 2, the Lexi gas is running low, but winter isn't here. Lexi Electric's running high, but it's been a really hot several months here. So again, I think most of those are looking pretty good. Leon Gas, because that bill doesn't come very frequently and it hasn't been paid for the first quarter yet. So it's at 0.
Is that propane?
Yes, it is. Moving down the page to operating supplies, you see that some of the supply accounts are being spent fairly quickly, but that's often because at the end of the start of the fiscal year, we'll do a big order and just have things on hand. And so move to page 3. Digital collection contracts at 59%, but those often get front loaded at the start of the fiscal year. We have a new contract that we pay. Same with virtual services contracts. So, as I say, most no legal services yet, although I believe I informed you last month that we have changed attorneys and gone with Dugan, McKissick, and Longmore, one of the larger firms in the county. And the reason for that was that they have HR specialists on staff.
Have we signed a contract with them?
We have an MOU with them.
All right. So they are on retainer?
The way we work it is they know that we are their client, and when we want something, we will reach out to them, but we're not paying them anything. We pay as we go, and they've agreed to that.
All right. Back up to the mobile library. We don't have it yet. And we saw your new dates and everything.
Yeah, the mobile library is in Maryland. So anytime anybody wants to go up and see it, it's in Kent Island, just across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge from Annapolis. I did send you out a video of it. So it has been delivered. And we were estimating, I have that as an update later. I can just go ahead and give it now. November 15th to 17th for a turnover to us, and there'll be a process to do that with a checklist. We'll bring it down, we'll get the wrap on it. We will have a soft launch probably approaching the holiday time. And we want to have the official ribbon cutting very early in January, weather allowing, because of course the General Assembly will begin in January, and we'd like our delegation to be able to attend. So that's kind of our update on the mobile library. And as you may have seen from the video, It is a custom vehicle. It's not a, assembly. It's one off using a lot of aluminum. So that explains some of the delays. But we now have it in Maryland, and the firm that is putting the final assembly together really is nationally known and does a lot of work, not only for libraries, but for the military, for the CIA, for the FBI. So we're confident they're going to do a really great job for us. And
So when we pick it up, do we owe any money on it?
no, it's completely paid for.
Okay.
Everything is done.
And just a weird idea, based on your estimated arrival date, maybe Santa could write it into the square all tricked out.
It will depend on when the wrap is done, but we're hoping that will be done fast enough that maybe we could, the first Friday there in Leonardtown, they have 10,000 people there and there's security concerns. So I don't know about that, but possibly we could make an initial tour for a soft opening.
John, that is an
Michael,
excellent idea.
Yeah, so the company in Kent Island, they're doing the shelving and the IT and
Yeah, if you saw the video, it's empty inside. So, anything that is going to help it do service. So they'll be installing a monitor, camera monitors, the furnishings, the flooring. So it will look inside very nice as opposed to being an empty aluminum shell.
Sorry, I noticed that, in the contract, it said every item in the van is warranted differently, basically by the manufacturer. Maybe the chassis, drivetrain, or electronics inside the van or something. So just a suggestion that when we take possession, we gather up any warranty information we have on each and every piece in that van and make a little library of it so that when something inevitably breaks.
They will be giving us a complete packet at
Yeah.
turnover, and we'll also have a checklist that we'll go through with them. It's just like when you get, your car delivered, you get, here's all your warranties. So we're really looking forward to that. It's been a long time coming. Over to page 4. Memberships is a little above 17%, but again, those are often front loaded at the start of the fiscal year. People send out the invoices for memberships. IT contract services, but those are expected. We have a list of all the, obviously an emergency can happen, but we have a list of all the expected IT expenses. So
Excuse me.
that one's,
Can we back up a second?
Yeah.
Are you referring to the postage line there?
postage.
Memberships, you were talking about memberships?
No memberships. It's on page 4 and it says, yeah, postage. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down.
I see, 37%.
Yeah, 37%. Yeah, as I say, often that's front loaded. So at the start of a fiscal year, we'll get an invoice for a membership.
From the Friends?
No, we don't pay the Friends anything, they pay us.
These are like professional library organizations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, all right, I got it.
So our grand total expenses over on page 5 for restricted are listed for you, and you see what we kind of spent so far for the year there. Over to page 6. You see that we've started getting funding from the county and from the state. 17% collected for both of those. A little bit of good news on other income under interest for the MLGIP account. 39% interest collected so far, so we may get a little bit more in interest than we were perhaps budgeting for, which is nice.
On
Service,
on what balance?
that's the interest that we're getting for all the money that's in that one account, the MGLIP account, and the balance goes up and down. But I can tell you in a minute, we'll see exactly what's in that account for now.
All right.
Over to page 7. Not a lot done with grants yet. 8, let's see, I don't really have much to look at until we get to page 9, where I did want to take a look at so the way the FOL funds work is that they give us money to administration, and administration then distributes as needed. So you see that programming, they used to get money of their own. They need money for the year. So we took money that's in the admin account, $20,000, and put it into programming so that we can continue programming for the upcoming year. So you asked how much money is in the MLGIP account. That's under fund balance at the very bottom of page 10. So the fiscal year 23 ending balance, you see what we've collected so far, what we've currently expensed. And then, so at the moment this was done, which was August 31st of this year, the PNC Treasury account, $205,828. The PNC Analysis account, $292,592. And the MLGIP account, $563,521. That's the money that, when the state gives us money, it goes into that account, for example.
And then we draw it into those other two.
Well, yeah, we allocated into those as necessary for like payroll. I will say that the $1,061,891 figure, we have to, for the next 2 months, spend out of that. And so yesterday we approved invoices for over $100,000. So that figure is not like, hey, we've got that, it's free. We will, at the end of the fiscal year, have a better idea of what the fund balance is. And we will, once the audit is done, give you the final number for last year's income and outgo. So that's kind of where we are with where the money is right now.
Thanks, Michael.
And at the moment, $973,000 available in fund balance. But again, you're looking at several $100,000 more expenses before we get another infusion. So questions about the budget?
The infusions. So I think they give us 2 months at a time, 6 transfers a year. Is
That's
that
correct. Yeah.
When's the drop date on that? When do they send that money?
Well, they give us a schedule of it, and is it the end of each month? Basically.
The county, we have a date. It's generally like the first or second week of every other month, but it's not consistent. They just give us specific dates, and they don't always drop it on that date. They get close, but the state is just sometime within the month that it's due, usually around the 15th, but it kind of varies.
Okay, so the state is every month.
Nope, they're both every other
other
month.
Yeah,
They are both every other month.
But sometime in that every other month, the state money arrives, and it's not necessarily regular.
Right. So we know that the dates are a little iffy, but they're at the front end of the first 2 months. Is that correct?
I'm not following your
The
question.
state money can actually vary considerably within the month it is due.
Let's go back to the county money. So the county money comes in 2 months in a slug. Does it come in at the beginning of those 2 months?
So the fiscal year started on July 1, and we got the first infusion on what, like August 15th?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So, and so the next one will be October-ish, early October.
So August 15th was July and would cover August. So it's kind of back funding 1 month and refunding the rest of the second month,
Yeah, sure,
kind of ish.
kind of.
Have we ever talked to them about bringing the whole thing to the front end of the 2-month window?
Not in my time here.
Would that be a good
That's
idea?
that's dependent upon their finances too.
Right.
Um,
So John, something to remember is that they are also closing their budget at the same time, at the end of the fiscal year. So they are also finalizing the FY 24 budget. They haven't even printed it yet. I mean, they are also doing their audit. They are making sure that they have the funds and where they go. So every company is taking July, every government entity is taking July to complete the end of the year before processing the next one.
But they gave us those last 2 months in April to get them off their books.
No, they accidentally gave us the last 3 payments in early
January. Yeah.
January or February.
So
They realized they made the mistake. They told us they made the mistake, but they said, we'll just let you keep it.
so rather than give 4 months back and get it again later in the year, they just said, okay, you've had your infusion for the year.
So last year was the exception where we were able to have all of the funds in from this county, not the state, by January or February. I can't remember the exact date, but that is not normal and won't happen again, I bet.
So I understand that their collections probably fluctuate,
Probably.
but I think it'd be worth doing a trial balloon to see if there's any way we can get whatever they've got at the front end of the 2-month cycle rather than halfway through or at the back end of it.
Well, I think Michael and I can talk about that, but we do need to work with them and we want to keep a good relationship with them. And in reality, the last payment we would normally get would be in June. So it's enough to hold us through July most of the time.
So basically, we don't bother county accounting anymore or county finance anymore than we need to.
Well, I'm not saying the
Yeah.
question has to be adversarial, but I mean,
Yeah. All right, so other,
sorry.
yeah,
Yeah,
please go ahead.
could you help understand when you talk about the Friends restricted funds? What does that mean? Like, what kind of things are they saying?
Oh,
And-
okay.
And how is
The-
that communicated?
all
Do you
right,
have
the
any
Friend-
agreement in writing, or is it just a discussion, or how does this happen?
Oh, okay. So let me clarify what restricted means there. It means that it's not part of our regular fund, that it is dedicated to use in ways that the Friends say. And they have 4 things, and yes, we have an official agreement with them that we may spend that on.
Okay.
So those 4 things include staff development, but not salaries. They pay for an intern, just like the board does, for materials and for expenses like furniture. So those are the primary things that they're for. So I can't say I'm going to use this for the OPEB. I mean,
No, I
yeah,
understand.
yeah.
I was just wondering how specific were they, and
Yeah,
Do they-
they're very good about, and programming is one. They're very good about just saying, okay, but we do give them an accounting and tell them what we spend the money on.
So more or less one-time things, right?
They're all one-time things. Yeah, well, the exception would be under materials for digital resources. They have been the primary supporter of the Hoopla app. So we regularly take $20,000 a year from what they give us and put it into Hoopla. So, and we acknowledge that as one of our primary supports between them and Smurla, really the way we can afford Hoopla.
So if I understand what you just explained, it's quasi restricted. Here it is, but you guys get to
Yeah.
choose the categories.
Yeah, as
All right.
long as, and we give them accounting, and as long as we're within the guidelines they've given us, they don't have any issue with it. Okay, with no other questions, we'll move right along then. I'm going to take up security and for now skip intellectual freedom and legislative and legal update. Just so in case a board member has to leave, you'll have something I think is probably of more significance for the immediate workings of our library. So we had 3 security audits done by St. Mary's County Sheriff's Department. And the primary emphasis was on violence, active shooting. And we were having, unfortunately, quite a time there, especially early in the spring when it seemed like every other day we were seeing a mass shooting. But there are, just general security concerns as well. So the sheriffs send representatives in and they do audits. And I've given you all 3 audits, but I know you probably have a chance to look through them in any depth. So I'll just go ahead and summarize some of the major things for you.
Michael, before you do that, depending on how deep you're going to dive, I'm a little uncomfortable with those discussions being an open session because we are talking about security issues. Should we defer it to a closed session next month?
Let me think about that 1 second. Yes, we can. Under even St. Mary's County more restrictive Open Meetings Act to discuss security concerns, we could, and I'm happy to do that.
I'll move that we do that, and that'll give everybody time to do a little deeper dive into what you presented.
You really don't have to do a motion to do that. I'll just say, okay, we will sunset that item for now, and we'll do it next time.
I think
I
that's a
don't know
good-
how much you want to hear about what's going on with legislation and legal concerns. We are starting to see instances of Maryland, and one just happened in Carroll County yesterday, where a school board begins to try to restrict what libraries can do.
Public
So
or their school library,
I'm sorry.
public or their school.
Their school libraries. So far in Maryland, we haven't, other than individual challenges of one sort or another, we haven't seen any official government action against libraries. So I've prepared quite a lengthy thing, but basically in 32 states at this point, there is some sort of legislation moving forward or passed to try to restrict not only in school libraries, or that they're the primary ones, but also in public libraries, what the collections can be. Texas, Florida, Missouri, Utah, and South Carolina are the leaders there. Missouri, for example, has passed a law that restricts what happens in public libraries. I'm going to move instead of something that recently happened in Texas, just because it could possibly have some effect on what happens in Maryland. So Texas passed a law, and it was a law based on HB 900 that restricted what publishers and booksellers can do in the state. So it requires vendors to rate all books, not only the ones they have published now or plan to publish, but they have ever published that are still being sold, on 3 ratings. And that is sexually explicit, which is defined as patently offensive by community standards. Those books cannot be sold in schools. Sexually relevant, that is, that mentions something about sexuality, but it wouldn't be considered patently offensive under community standards. Those books would get a rating of sexually relevant. Any student in schools would have to have parental permission to be able to check one out from the library. And finally, no rating, there's nothing there. So a couple of other things. Texas has the power to change any rating that the publisher gives. So the publisher says, well, this is sexually relevant, and Texas could say, no, it's not sexually explicit. You may not sell this book in Texas to schools.
So Grey's Anatomy would flunk.
Grey's Anatomy would certainly get a sexually relevant and possibly explicit because it has anatomical drawings. Interestingly, something like the Bible would certainly be sexually relevant and in passages sexually explicit. So it kind of looks like maybe they just made it difficult for students to read the Bible in public schools in Texas. Moving on then, any vendor who does not rate their books would be banned from sales to Texas public schools. So you don't do it, you cannot sell in Texas.
Those ratings don't seem to have anything to do with what MPAA does with movies.
Something like that, with the difference being that we're talking literally millions of titles here. Amazon would have to do this if they wanted to say, they'd either have to say, no Texas schools may buy from us, or if a Texas school wants to, and how are they going to know?
Out of state.
They would have to rate all the books for sale on Amazon. You're talking millions of titles here. So on September 1st, last week, 1 week ago, that law was blocked by a federal judge. Why is it important for Maryland? Texas is one of the largest school markets, and that was going to affect what publishers might be able to put out, or certainly have a chilling effect on what they decide they might want to publish in schools.
Yeah, they have a lot of influence where textbooks are concerned for the same reason.
Very much, yeah. So that law was blocked. Now, he hasn't yet issued his full ruling, so we don't know why, but at least one of the plaintiff's 3 arguments seems to have had some weight with him. The first is that the standards are too vague. Community standards, what community? There's Austin, and then there's Llano, Texas, which tried to close down their public library. The standards there might be widely different. Patently offensive to who? Who gets to make that decision? And if you had left that at a local level, it might fly a little bit better, although that community standards is still impossibly vague. But at a state level, those things are almost impossible to determine. And the publishers, I think, scored on that ground on the basis of prior restraint. So schools are government funded. And what they were saying about this was that's shutting down speech before it even happens. It's called prior restraint. You're going to say to a publisher, you can't publish that because it's going to be something you cannot sell in our state. So this is the government through the schools doing something that was constitutionally very problematic. The final was untenable burden. Imagine having to look at every book that a publisher has, or if you're a book vendor, even a bookseller in a Texas town, you'd have to go look at every book on your shelf. Even if you had artificial intelligence root through all digital variants of it, you're still an incredible amount of time, an incredible amount of effort. So I will say that although it's been blocked, Texas is appealing. So we're going to have to see the end result of this.
Let me clarify something I think I heard you just say. If this were Texas, Fenwick Street Books would have a problem?
Absolutely. They would have to also look at their books. They couldn't rely on a publisher to do it, especially some of the books they sell are not in print anymore. What publisher would give them that information? They're a
But
youth
that's
bookstore. Yes,
If they sell to a school, right?
if they're selling to a school, but a student walks in to buy something, you know, basically, this is, you know, in some ways it was aimed broader than just at schools, but yeah, if they were going to sell to schools, but you know, if a teacher walks in, are they and buys a book for a class, are they selling to a school? So I said this law was kind of vague, but Texas is appealing. They want at least to have the ability to put in the 3 ratings, and we'll just have to see where the courts go with this. So as I say, the implication from Maryland is just that A, this kind of thing is happening increasingly, and then B, if it's going to chill the publication of different books that are primarily intended for a school market, especially so textbooks, then that could have an effect on Maryland as well.
Is this up through what level? 12, K to 12?
K through 12, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Illinois has passed a Right to Read Act. Have I told you about that already? I think I told you about that. There's a federal law that's been resurfaced, the Federal Right to Read Act. So that's going to put $500,000 into one program, $100,000 into another program to try to address the yawning gap between school districts that do not have as much and school districts that do. 10% of schools K through 12 in the United States do not have a library. 30% do not have a full-time librarian. 2.5 million kids without access to a library in schools. So they want to do that. The other thing that it does that's of interest for Maryland is that it establishes that school libraries are bound by the Constitution. So nobody can come in and say, I don't like this book based on my religious perspective, and have the school have to take it away. So we'll see whether or not that passes. It did not pass last year, but it has been resurfaced precisely because of the 32 states that are trying somehow to restrict what's going on in schools. Quite a few states are following Illinois' lead. The one thing that's problematic to me about the Illinois law is that it says that so basically, and it's for public libraries, it's not for schools in their case. A public library has to establish a policy that says that they will not ban books based upon doctrinal objections, and that they certify that with the state. And libraries that do not comply will not receive state funding. To me, that's the problematic one. There's 5 libraries right now where there's a local bill to defund them. One's happening in East Washington State, for example. A citizen complained, you've got books that are about LGBTQ plus things. The library said, we're going to keep them. And now there's a local movement ahead to have the local funding stripped from the library. It will be voted on November 7th there, election day. We just have to see what happens. But basically, locally, if someone objects to a library and says, okay, fine, we're just going to defund it, they wouldn't care if the library got state funding or not. So to me, although that's a bit of here's how we're going to enforce it, it may not cover some of the most extreme instances of objections to what a library carries. So there's any number of states, about 4 or 5, that are working to follow Illinois' lead. They're going to have maybe different ways of doing it. For example, if a library will not set up a policy that guarantees diversity of collection in a pluralistic society, that they can be investigated by the state's attorney general. But so we're starting to see in response to some of these rights to read laws. And as I think I've told you before, Maryland will be putting one forward this upcoming legislative session.
Is there any whiff right now coming out of the General Assembly that this is even on their radar?
Maryland General Assembly,
Uh-huh.
not yet. The bill is being written and will be presented to them. We'll find sponsors for it. And I would not be surprised to see it pass, depending on how it's written, but that's still being decided. So that's just kind of where we are in terms of Maryland, and the effect some of these national things might have on Maryland. If the federal bill would pass, then Maryland schools would be protected. If the Maryland bill passes, Maryland schools, because it is written for schools, public libraries, and for universities in Maryland, would be protected. It doesn't say you can't protest a book if you don't like it. It just says the library has to have a policy guaranteeing diversity of collection, that there is a way to protest a book, but that the library may not remove it solely on doctrinal grounds or personal objections. There has to be something else there. We have seen a record number of challenges to books last year, and probably we'll see another one again this year. There are lists of 300 and 400 books going around, most of which have nothing to do with sexually explicit. Has anybody read the book Caste by Isabel Stewart Wilkerson? It's just about race in various cultures, including United States. That book is on the ban list in many Florida schools, for example. A book that talks about Rosa Parks banned in Florida. A book that called We Are the Ku Klux Klan banned in Texas. It's really an attempt to insert a political agenda into what libraries can offer. And I think as libraries, our aim is to try to support the diversity that is in our community. And I'm hopeful that some of these bills will give us some weapons to try to avoid defunding, to try to avoid excess. If somebody shows up and says, here's my list of 300 books, library, take them all out, that puts an intolerable burden on the library. And a law like that would give us much more freedom to be able to respond. So I had a lot more, but that's, I think, enough for now, because at least one of you I know has to leave a little early today. Michael, any new trustee business you'd like to bring forward?
Before we move on, any comments or questions about some of these library issues nationwide that we're seeing? Any follow-up, or are we okay for now?
I just have a question. How come, I understand that all of the concern seems to be sexual explicitness. How come no one has brought up violence in some of these books? Just that, I'm just surprised it's just that one category. Nobody mentions other things. And as Michael was saying, it's all in how you perceive things to be.
I will say that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
I will say that if you look at the long list of banned books by a group like, say, Moms for Liberty, rather Orwellian vocabulary for a group whose primary aim seems to be restrict everybody else's freedom, you'll see that about 60 to 70% of them are not necessarily sexually explicit, but they have to do with themes of LGBTQ plus or Black Americans. So the bias is fairly clear there. let's say there can't be some overlap of sexual explicitness or sexuality in a book and those other two categories, but that seems to be the aim is, again, to insert a political agenda in what libraries can offer. And to answer your question about violence, I guess I'd say it's because if you look at the movie ratings, for example, an extremely violent movie could have a PG rating with people's heads being blown off quite visually, and it doesn't get the sort of restrictions that would, for example, accompany nudity in a movie. It's just American culture. I guess I'd have to say that's my only answer. If you went to Europe, it would be the exact opposite in many countries. Nudity on public television, but violence is considered to be something that should not be shown to young people.
Thank you, Dorothy. Anybody else before we move on? Yeah, Judith.
Yeah, well, I mean, on a good note, we had the story time about a month ago here at Lexington Park. Dorothy Andrews came down, did her story time. And, you know, there were dozens of libraries across the country that banned that story hour. Objecting to what, I don't know. So I think we can be proud that we don't toe that line. But there were many, many areas that refused to allow these books to be read in their library. So, yeah, so there are other subjects, Dorothy, that people are very sensitive about. So I don't know the rhyme or reason of all of it, or why people objected to the story times, but it does happen everywhere.
I can clarify that actually. No libraries banned that. What they did is they said, we cannot have that as one of our joint programs with you, because it endorses a particular religious view. So nobody said, we won't allow you to. They said you have to use the meeting room. And that's what St. Mary's County did as well. And I will say that we did have public requests to me not to allow that program to happen. And to me, I think it's, as you say, Judith, I want to agree with that. I think it's important that we protect the diversity in the community. And the Brave books have people in the community who like them, who endorse them, who agree with those values. And so they get the same protection to use our meeting room as anybody else. And I'm very proud of that for St. Mary's County Library. And I'm told that the programs are well attended and greatly appreciated. So I'm glad that we took that stand, and we should.
All right.
I have a couple of items, if I may.
Sure.
Most people are not going to have this OPEB benefits from Bolton in front of them. So just please make a note on.
John, are we moving in? Okay, are we moving into the new business portion now?
Yep.
Take it away, John.
Okay. On page 4, I see under trust contribution employer, they have listed what we spent last year, 92,966, as a contribution to OPEB. I don't think that's correct. And in fact, it skews the number, bottom of that page, funded status 42.42%. So if my reading of that is correct, I think Bolton ought to be asked for a clarification or retraction on that.
May I make a point on that? Judith, last month you asked me about a number, contribution number that was higher. And when I looked at it, basically that's what Bolton does. They take the amount that we contribute to Schwab and the amount that we pay out of our retiree account for health insurance and combine them. So that particular year that was higher, that was the amount we paid for health insurance as well as the contribution we made for Schwab. So that is what they do. That's where they put that. It's part of the contributions.
And it's our contribution to health insurance for retired employees, not the whole thing, but yeah.
So then money never went into the OPEB account, but I understand what you're reading kind of reads like it does.
Yeah, sorry about any confusion there. No, when we started off talking about the OPEB funding, we gave you a full list of the direct contributions, investments that we've made. Those are the investments the library's made. Other values are what we are paying out of pocket on a pay-go basis for that insurance.
Well,
Any
am I-
other,
am I looking at that wrong then? I mean, I'm just reading it the way they wrote it.
It looks like it went in and came out, but it never actually went in.
No, that's money that went straight to the health insurance companies.
Well, that skews the bottom. How funded are we at 42%?
So when I can't answer why they do that, but when I work with them for the audit, they request all of the Schwab information, and then they request all of the money that we paid for the retirement insurance, as well as all of the contributions that retirees put in from their fund. And so they take all of that, and it's all part of the report.
I think we ought to have a talk with them about that. On page 12 of the same document, we have contributions in relation to actuarially determined contributions. That goes back to 2014. I'll let you all do the math. But we are now underfunded to the tune of $130,790 in terms of keeping up what is suggested to become fully funded. So that's that item. Next question for Michael. Any nibbles so far on the RFP for the strategic plan that went out on Emma?
Yes, I've had 4 nibbles. People asking questions, wanting some clarification, and no bids yet.
But we did uncover some nibbles then.
Yes, and in fact, so I posted that on Emma, and I will tell you that it was quite a process because we had to establish that we are a state entity to their liking, because only state entities can put things into Emma. And they had quite a lot of questions about whether or not we were. And they said, well, we're not a county entity and our employees are in state and, state retirement. And so we were able to convince them that we were. So it's there. I also posted on 2 national lists where nonprofits can post RFPs. So, 3 have come from those, and 1 has just come, 2 came because I also shared it on a Maryland list, library list. So 1 came from there. So I'm confident we're going to get a vendor. I'm certainly hopeful anyway. And if we don't, we can either lower our standards on the RFP and have a vendor do less, or we can, forego the money. We can use it for expenses that we have to do the audit ourselves. I'm sorry, not the audit, but the strategic plan.
Well, I'm glad you went the extra mile to get us on Emma, because that opens the door for us for a whole bunch of other things down the road.
Yeah, we're now Emma members, and posting something on there is wow, is that a process? But we are now and able to do that.
Okay,
thank you, Michael, for doing that.
my last question. Check me on the history here. Last December, there was someone approached us about a gift of stock. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And the December before that, we also had an approach.
And it's the same person, I believe. We've talked with our auditor about the library actually establishing some sort of an account where that might happen. The Friends were asked about it and they are not willing to take it on, and the foundation is also not willing to take it on. The concern is that if one of those organizations were to do it, they would then have to hire the services of auditors and just double check everything. So neither of those organizations wants to set that up. We are discussing the possibility, And the first thing we have to do is determine if the library truly is a 501c3. We get tax exempt status because of our government status, but so we're still working on it. I'd like us to be able to do it. I hate leaving money on the table.
Well, there's not just that, but we have to take a look down the road. St. Mary's County will not always, either for political purposes or for revenue purposes on their own dime, be able to be as generous to us as they are being right now. We need to have a way to kind of cushion that should it come at us. And I think it's inevitable. The governor's out there on the road right now wondering why Maryland economy seems to be stagnating in comparison to Maryland's neighbors. That's his problem, not ours. But the way I view having the ability to take stock and to create an endowment, the state and the county should be looked upon as providing the meat and potatoes. An endowment is going to provide the cake and the ice cream. And that's how we cushion those pullbacks from other sources. And to say no to a wannabe donor, no, we can't help you. I think that's a huge, huge deficiency.
Well, moving forward, this will become a matter for this group, the trustees. It's starting to look like to me. As I say, I don't have any other group who I feel either wants to or has the capacity to take it on well. So we, as I say, we've been talking to our accountants about it. And I've only had sort of a couple of preliminary emails back and forth with them, but I think that's something that if we're going to do, it will become a library and not a, our matter here for you as a group to do.
Are you familiar with community foundations? So we had it for many, many years. We had the Community Foundation of Southern Maryland, which I believe can provide this type of service. I believe they morphed into the Community Foundation of the Chesapeake. And I'm not 100% certain, but I think this is kind of what they do. They take and hold funds. Now, are we government or are we not? I'm not sure, but for nonprofits and make those investment strategies. So it might be something to look into and speak to them if they could help us or not.
Yeah, we are government. Are we also, a nonprofit, and we've got nonprofit status, but we would need to establish that with the IRS is my understanding, but as I say, we're looking into this. So I don't know if our foundation could talk to them, and possibly that could be something that would work.
And that's the
thank you
part
for
I
that.
don't understand. That's what foundations do.
Well,
John, the foundation does not have the expertise or capacity to take on this project, as Michael said. That's the answer. That's the long and the short of it.
What
The volunteer
expertise do you
organization
need?
does
You
not
open
have
an
the
account.
capacity. What?
What expertise do you need? You open an account, you take the donation.
John, this is a conversation we've had for several months, and it's a little more complicated than that. This is the new business section, so I'm going to move on. Does anybody else have new business they would like to bring up today?
So I don't know, we've been through legislation. I'm just thinking long-term. We have a legislative session every December, I think, with the county commissioners and our delegation and state senators. I don't know if that's something that we attend.
I think it's October this year.
Oh, okay.
But
short time.
yes, I go to that. But you as a board
So-
member are certainly welcome to.
So long-term, I don't know what we're thinking or planning on for Charlotte Hall. But our delegate, Brian Crosby, is vice chair of the Economic Committee in Annapolis. He ran that he can bring home the bacon. I think we should start putting together a strategy for asking the state to provide funding for a new library. I don't know if that first means planning and drawing, acquiring land, the building itself. I imagine it's a multi-year process. I think we should put it out there and ask for help. And we're going to have to ask repeatedly for help. But last year at the end of the session, this past year at the end of the session, with the huge pork barrel dump of money out of Annapolis, they wrote a check out to PG County for a brand new library. Here's your library, here's your park, here's your theater center. Just money was just dumped. Well, I think we should stand in line and start asking for it. And even without, are we planning on replacing Charlotte Hall? And where do we go with that issue with an aging library?
I thought we had a placeholder for 5 years out.
I don't
We
know.
do have capital funding earmarked by the county, 3.5 million for fiscal year 28. Now, I will say that the Maryland State Library was not awfully happy about a library getting funded outside of the state capital funds, which is $7.5 million a year.
Well, that's a dog in a manger deal.
So basically, come fiscal year 28, we will ask for probably $2 million from that fund. We got 1.6 for Leonardtown. So certainly that's something that we'll look at doing. Just for Delegate Crosby did bring us $50,000 for the mobile library, and we're thankful for that. So that's something to look at. But we can certainly start to think about what to do about that facility. It's a little bit landlocked. It's difficult to expand it given the shape of the lot and the parking lot. And if, if somebody were to say, here's a $20 million stock donation, and please may that happen.
We couldn't take it.
Yeah, I know. But let's say we could. All right, and we got it, and we could build a new library. We've talked about that kind of pie in the sky possibility. Maybe a facility to 20,000 square foot facility that would be equal to our other two in terms of the appearance, the staffing, the size. And I'd love to have that happen, but that would take a lot of money, and yes, we'd have to get land, and so I don't know about a new one, but we will have to look and see. Let's say we can get another 2 million, 5.5 million would probably go a long way towards.
What do you think all up looking forward? What could the tab come to?
For new library?
Yeah, to do it nice, but not opulent.
What size?
Well, let's say the size of this one.
25,000 square feet. 15 million.
50.
15.
Oh,
15.
15.
Yeah, 15 million. Construction costs have gone up. The share in Leonardtown was 11.6. But costs have gone up substantially since then. So for a standalone facility, and I incidentally serve on the committee that awards the funds, the 7.5 million a year. Based on the construction I've seen and the bids I've seen, I'd say 15 million. Nice. It's not going to be the Taj Mahal.
To Judith's point, if we back the clock up, we ought to be thinking right now with drawings,
Well, location, like you said.
location.
That could be one ask, is money Charlotte Hall is a growth area in the county. So, and there's a ton of new growth going on up there. So location's the first issue, right? Is where would we put it, and how much land do we need? And does the county want to go in with us like they did at Leonardtown? Yeah, it's a multi-year process. 5 years out just to start means we're at least 10 years away.
Well, our
So,
MOU with the county basically says they own the buildings. And they do the construction contract. I don't know if we could come up with 15 million on our own, but so if the county said, all right, we gave you 3.5, we're going to up that. And again, we're talking pie in the sky here. We're going to county commissioner saying, what are you talking about, Michael? Let's say we're going to give you more. We would try to get a state match. But the initial cost, I will say, are not insubstantial. You have to get land. You do have to have architectural plans in order to get funding. So we do have a facilities master plan that says that Charlotte Hall is the branch that most needs attention.
Right, so this is where the ask comes
Yeah.
in for legislatures to start passing, to put us a line item in for architectural drawing, for land acquisition, and start Bouldering again. May not get it this year, but we've got to go and ask. And then when they do have a dump at the end of the year, at least we're on the list for asking for the money. So just my
So
thoughts.
there's also another possibility that may save money and update buildings and help a lot, and that is to not build a building. I've seen a lot of libraries. King County Library actually has a spot in a shopping mall that is a fully functional branch. And then all of that overhead, all of the maintenance of the building is on the company that they lease from. And that might be a really good option for Charlotte Hall to look at one of the new shopping centers that's opening up as a potential option. So we might consider thinking outside the box instead of investing in a long-term building.
There is a storefront library just north of us in Solomons.
That's true too.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I have worked in a storefront library before. It has advantages and disadvantages. One interesting thing that happened in Texas, which you know, I talked about their law earlier. I hope it been a thing I'm picking on Texas. I don't mess with Texas. They turned a Walmart into a library. So, you know, even an abandoned building can be made functional as a library. It's not necessarily beautiful, but it works.
Yeah.
So it is not necessarily outside the question. The real question will be money.
I like the idea of perhaps co-locating with a community center for the northern end. You know, right now there's plans for the southern end of the county, but nothing for the northern end. So that could be a selling point too.
Mhm.
With a YMCA or with a bowling alley would also be kind of fantastic.
And it has a great, we really hope that the community center down here was going to go right next to Charlotte, right next to Lexington Park Library, and they decided there wasn't enough room. But you know, not only does it make a great co-located facility, but then when kids get a little rowdy, we can say, go run off your energy.
Yeah. Michael, could you please send us as a reminder, kind of some of that summary information about the capital projects that are lined up and sort of what's already sort of penciled in on the calendar over the next chunk of time about the big term renovations and improvements coming?
Are you asking about the facilities master plan?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's on our website.
Oh, okay, great.
And
All right.
it's
That
available
might be a
to the
good starting point for us.
public. It is, I gave you a copy of it about a year ago, so some of you new members may not have it. But it is 100 pages long, so don't plan on running it off. I will get you another copy of it.
Okay.
Next time.
Next time. All right, that might be good for us to take a quick skim over. Anything else we should talk about for today before we wrap up?
Our next meeting, October 13th, is at Charlotte Hall Library. And we are having a foundation fundraiser on November 10th at Leonardtown Library. At least that's the idea. We have the president of the St. Mary's historic St. Mary's City coming to do a presentation for us. And we will have some catering. There's all kinds of interesting archaeological things happening down there at the city, and he gives really good presentations. He's a fascinating speaker. So we'll be having his presentation and then inviting foundation members or donors to come on out, and then we'll be selling some tickets to it. November 11th is Veterans Day. We had hoped to have our mobile library ready, but we always have a library presence. So if any board member would like to ride in the library van for Veterans Day, it is a nice day. About 8:30 in the morning, we start with a breakfast with often the commissioners are there. In many cases, state officials come down. Representative Hoyer is almost always there. So it's just a very nice day. We get shuttled up to where the parade starts at St. Mary's Riken, and we ride on down in the library van and just stick our hands out the window with flags and wave at people. So if anybody wants to participate in that, I would happily have you join me. Often it's just me because everybody else gets the day off. But if you want to be part of that, that would be great.
And
All
just to confirm, looking forward, next month, we're going to have a partially closed session for security discussion.
Yes, I will set aside a closed session to discuss security issues.
All right. Thank everybody again. I really appreciate your expertise and perspective and the different viewpoints that everybody brings to the table. I think it helps us reach good decisions as a group. And I really appreciate everyone's time and energy and dedication and commitment to a really amazing library. It's what we all have in common. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
All right.
So moved.
Thank you, John J.
Second.
Thank you, John W. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thanks, everybody. See you next
Thank you,
week.
everybody. If you don't have a copy of There, they are here. It is our One Maryland, One Book